One of the first large crowdfunding campaigns Rebel News ever did was for the wildfires that consumed the city of Fort McMurray almost 10 years ago. It was a shocking fire. The entire city had to be evacuated, and there were hellish scenes of, arches of fire over the roads. I found that deeply troubling, and I love Fort McMurray for many reasons. And we deployed Rebel News to try to crowdfund. We actually raised over 100 grand. It was a very meaningful thing. And it started us down the path of not just crowdfunding for Rebel projects, but for third party charity projects. That one we actually teamed up in the end with the Red Cross, and we've gone on to other things. There's something about fires that I think is obviously primordial. I mean, the birth of man and the birth of fire are closely connected. Managing fire, handling fire, and it's very humbling. The works of man, such as you see in Fort McMurray, that can be consumed by this force of nature. It's like a volcano or a tidal wave. It's terrifying. We saw that in Lahaina, Maui, a year ago. There's terrible scenes of scorched vehicles and lost lives. And now we see that again in Alberta, in the beautiful town of Jasper, a beautiful national park, obviously a tourist industry and a home to so many people. Shocking images. And to me, the images of burnt out vehicles is somehow terrifying. It feels like a war zone, and it is a war, man versus nature, and it's almost an impossible battle. I'm troubled by what I see. Joining us now to give us the facts about this all-consuming fire from Jasper, and to talk a little bit secondarily about why it was so bad. The most important news is what happened. Are people okay? Were there deaths? Is the fire under control? But once those first order questions are dealt with, I think it behooves us as people who care about public policy to ask why and how, because those questions sprung up in Fort McMurray and in Maui, and I think they ought to be answered here in Jasper too. Joining us now to talk about all this is our friend Lauren Gunter from the Edmonton Sun, whose column is called Jasper Blaze Exposes Possible Flaws in Parks Canada Wildfire Strategy. And Lauren joins us now. Lauren, great to see you again. These are very humbling things, fires, and they bring us together beyond partisan stripe. They're a terrible thing. Tell me what you know about the Jasper fires.
We don't know everything yet. There's going to be, in about 2 hours, a press tour of the town site for the first time since the fires went through on Wednesday night. So that's now about not quite 48 hours. And it'll all be pool photography, pool video. So one camera, maybe a couple of photographers will be allowed through, and we'll get a better chance to see what's what. But for instance, last night, Thursday night, a full day after the fire, the Jasper Park Lodge, which is the iconic historic lodge just outside the town site, sent an email to all of its staff saying we've lost 4 buildings. One of them was one of the very beautiful private manors that they have. One of the private suites that they have is a little like a big cabin.
Right.
One of them was a golf maintenance building. One was another equipment building of some sort. And then they lost another, I think, 4-suite guest house. So they've lost some stuff, but the main lodge is okay. And it sounds perhaps, and this sounds trivial at a time like this, but it sounds perhaps like the golf course hasn't been totally consumed. But the fire came towards this lodge from the golf course side. And so you have to think, with a 400-foot wall of flame coming at you, that it probably has consumed some. But we're going to find out, I think, a lot of the stuff in the west end of the town site of Jasper is gone. But as we found in Fort McMurray, there will be surprising survivors, meaning buildings. And most of the main infrastructure in town has been saved. fire crews tried very hard to keep the water treatment plant open and the hospital and all sorts of very important infrastructure like that, and they seem to have succeeded. So in the aftermath, it's going to be awful. We're going to see, as you said, a lot of burnt down buildings, burnt out cars, and it's going to be bad, but it may not be quite as bad as we were thinking it would be on Wednesday night.
Was there any loss of life that we know about?
Not that we know of, and there thankfully weren't any major injuries either. This one family, I think, is probably symbolic of a lot of the attitudes towards this fire. This family left Jasper, headed west. People were told to go west. I don't understand that. I guess the fire was too bad on the highway going east, because all the big facilities in Alberta are all to the east of Jasper.
Right.
But they were told to go west into BC, and they got to Valemont, which is a beautiful little town of about 1,000 people. And the people in Valemont said, "We don't know what we can do. There's 25,000 of you. What can we do? There's only 1,000 people in this town." And so this one family who'd been staying in Hinton, which is about 45 minutes east of Jasper, just outside the park gates, they thought, okay, well, we'll drive to Kamloops. Well, Kamloops is a 4-hour drive from there. Then they thought, well, we really should get back to Hinton. So they went from Kamloops to Calgary, from Calgary to Edmonton, and from Edmonton back to Hinton. It took them 15 hours to do this route that should take 40 minutes. And but at the end, they were interviewed, and they said, "Well, at least we survived. We're okay. We're fine. We got out of it." So that's the attitude I think an awful lot of people have had about that.
I remember when Fort McMurray went up in flames, I think one of the things that was credited for the survival of the people was that a lot of people in Fort McMurray work for big oil companies that have a lot of safety drills, and they have fire marshals, and people practice those things as part of the industry. So they're used to ideas like muster in a place and evacuate and who's the boss and stay calm. It's almost like and I know you've been on a cruise ship with us before, they have a little drill before the boat goes to sea, just so you're used to it. I'm guessing Jasper isn't the same way. You mentioned 400-foot flames. That's astonishing. I think that's as tall as a 40-story building.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
and the amount of heat from that, and that would jump over a river for sure, certainly a stream.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about the reason for that. There was all that dead forest that's been dead for years. Years ago, the pine beetle came and killed all the trees, but the trees are still standing up, and they're dry as a bone because they're dead. They're just standing up. And let's talk about that, because that was the fuel for this monstrous fire, wasn't it?
It was, absolutely. And Parks Canada had been warned again and again and again that it had to do something about these trees. But they are so woke and so green in their approach that they said, no, no, no. The natural thing is to let the trees stand, and eventually the forest will rejuvenate itself. Now, the way forests rejuvenate themselves
is through fire.
Yeah. So, I mean, they had to have sort of understood what they were saying was, well, we have to wait for a big fire to go through. They did want to do controlled burns. Parks Canada has said over the years that they would do controlled burns around the town site and down south into the valley where the pine beetle devastation was the worst. But the conditions are very tricky there. You can't do a big controlled burn in the summertime because there are 20,000 tourists there at any given time. And so you have to hope that there's not early snow, that there's not late snow, that there isn't a soaking rain, because controlled burns won't work in any of this. So you only have a few weeks in what are called the shoulder seasons on either side of the summer, in between summer and ski season, where you can do these controlled burns, and it never happened. So they just let tens of thousands of hectares of dead trees stand around getting drier and drier and drier. And the guy who has been the mayor or the chief elected officer of Jasper since 1989, a guy named Richard Ireland, he started in 2017 in a concerted way to try and get Parks Canada to do something about this. In 2018, the residents set up a campaign called Save Jasper, which was hoping to get Parks Canada to allow forest companies to come in and log. I was told last year by an executive in a forest company that they could help sort out the problems in Jasper in about 2 seasons if the parks would simply allow them to bring in equipment to take out every other tree. Like they have a plan, they have a formula about how many trees they have to take out and how they can stop the spread of a fire with taking out this tree and that tree and the one over there. But nobody at Parks Canada would listen. And they stuck with this environmental fantasy they have about how it was going to be naturally reforested. And
That's just not a thing. That's not.
No.
I mean, it is fire that is the I mean, and God bless it. Normally, I mean, for millennia, that's how forests were rejuvenated. But it doesn't really work if you're in the middle of a tourist town.
They also, that's the big thing there. The big problem is that you have this theory about how the forest is going to naturally revive itself, which involves fire, but it's not the natural forest anymore. I mean, there isn't any part of Jasper that is as it was before first humans. And I don't mean before first Europeans, before first whites. I mean, before first humans. There's no part of Jasper that is this idle about pre-human contact. So you have to accept that we are part of the ecosystem now, and particularly around the town site, you have to treat it as though it's a place where human beings live and work and recreate.